Time to hear our keynote speaker, Professor Ravi Srivastava from Center for Employment Studies and Institute for Human Development. Professor Ravi Srivastava, sir. Professor Ravi Srivastava is former professor of economics and chairperson, Center for the Study of Regional Development, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi, and full-time member of the National Commission for Enterprises in the Unorganized Sector. His main areas of research and publication include labor, employment, migration, social protection, agriculture, rural development, and rural poverty, the informal sector, regional development, decentralization, human development, etc. He has published 5 books, 4 monographs, and more than 100 papers in national and international journals. He is a recipient of numerous awards and scholarships, including the Commonwealth and the Fulbright Fellowship, the University Grants Commission's Award in Economics for innovative research on poverty, combining qualitative and quantitative methodologies, and more recently, the V.V. Giri Memorial Award in the year 2009 for contribution to research on labor migration. He is currently chairman of the Institute of Development Studies, Jaipur, and professor and director, Center for Employment Studies, Institute for Human Development, Delhi. He has performed consultancy and advisory roles for Planning Commission, Indian ministries, state governments, international agencies such as World Bank, ILO, ADB, UNDP, UNICEF, etc. He is past president of Indian Society of Labor Economics and current president of the UP and Uttarakhand Economic Association. We welcome you, sir. Over to Professor Ravi Srivastava, sir, the keynote speaker of this inaugural session.
Thank you, Dr. Dikshit. Thank you for inviting me. Thanks to you, to Dr. Dubey and Shashikanji. I think the introductory remarks made by Dr. Dubey and Neelkanji basically set the context for your conference. And I'm so glad that this virtual world this lockdown has made things difficult for a lot of us. But one of the positive sides of it is that the virtual world is easier to get together, so that in this international webinar, without worrying about visas and travel, you've been able to collect a galaxy of people from across the globe. I think, as you pointed out, Dr. Dubey pointed out, and Neelkanji pointed out, we are facing probably the most complicated situation that we have faced ever. On the one hand, we have to confront a pandemic, the unknown enemy that you and Neelkanji talked about. And already the infection rate in India today, at the stage of unlockdown 1, the infection rate in India is already the 3rd highest in the world. One of the problems with knowing about the virus or not knowing about the virus is that every country is on different parts of the curve. There is an exponential curve. We are on different parts of the curve, and we don't know exactly where we are. And in a country like India, this gets further complicated because we are a vast country. Therefore, different parts of the country are on different parts of the curve. Some are already slightly higher on the curve, some are lower on the curve. So the trajectory of the infection in the country as a whole is something we will not know immediately. It will take time for us to know. As Neelkanji pointed out, except for a handful of countries, the majority of countries went through a lockdown phase, and India imposed a lockdown which was with Oxford University. The Oxford University Index points out that the Indian lockdown was the most severe, most stringent in the world. This meant that people were immobilized wherever they were. The lockdown, which was announced on 23rd, left a lot of people stranded wherever they were, and they were immobilized. This led to a situation where, of course, people lost, because of the lockdown. We have a very large informal economy. And people in the informal economy lost jobs. They lost access to livelihoods. When they lost jobs and access to livelihoods, they also lacked access to food. Many of them did not have the wherewithal to pay for their accommodation. So they had to arrange for somewhere else to stay. They did not have accommodation. The shelters that were built or they were available in urban areas, the food that was being distributed in urban areas could not address their requirements. There were a large proportion of particularly the urban informal poor could not be reached in those dire straits. Now, there was something then which happened which many of us did not envisage. And that was that millions of migrants who were stranded came out on the roads and attempted to move back to their homes. Many people were surprised both by the magnitude of the migration and the nature of the reverse migration. People like me who have worked on this problem for decades were certainly not surprised by the magnitude, because that is something we have tried to assess over the decades. But we were still surprised at the degree of vulnerability which these migrants faced and the manner, the risks that they were prepared to take to get back home. I don't know how many, the broad estimates are, in my own estimates are, that after the lockdown, roughly, in my view, perhaps about 8 crore migrants, 8 to 9 crore migrants have been involved in the exodus, moving back from their areas where they were working to their native places. Perhaps about 2 to 3 crore migrants were intrastate migrants. So they moved back to native villages within their own states. 5 to 6 crore migrants moved back to their native villages across states, from one state to another state. Official transport, trains and buses were able to take care only about a quarter of these migrants. The current estimates are that trains and buses were able to transport something like 1.1 to 1.15 crores of these migrants. All the rest were use their own resources. They traveled on foot, they traveled on cycles, they traveled on carts, they traveled on trucks, they traveled on three-wheelers, whatever they could get. Such was the desperation that they traveled under great risk to get back home. And this is something which all of us have seen in visuals, all of us have read about. What I will do in the 15 minutes or so, 15 to 20 minutes, because I think the organizers had given me 20 to 25 minutes for my presentation, is that I'll go through a technical presentation. This is a technical webinar, so I believe that I should go through a technical presentation, share some details with you through a PowerPoint presentation. So I'll share the screen with you. Please let me know, Purnaji, if the screen is visible to you, and then I'll go through quickly. My presentation will focus on migration, but it will also focus on migration issues which are pertinent to UP as a source state. So let me just warn me if my presentation is visible to you. I'll just share the screen.
Yes, sir.
Well, you'll have to enable share screening.
Share screen enable. Share screen enable.
No, it is not.
We are doing, sir. Enabling.
Yeah.
Sir, done. So now you can share your screen.
Yeah, I'll do that. Okay. Is it shared? Can you see it?
No, not now.
Now?
Sir, no, sir, not. No. Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Coming, sir.
Yeah.
It's visible.
Okay, now I just have to. Okay.
Yes.
So just very quickly, let me go through some of the issues, which I think your learned audience, technical audience, probably aware of. But let me just first, to begin with, draw distinctions between migrants. When we speak about migrants in one breath, actually we are concerned with, there are different kinds of migrants. The first kind of migrant is long-term permanent migrants, and students of economics mainly speak about migrants who have moved from rural to urban areas. This is a one-way migration. You move, you settle in the urban areas. The second kind of migration is what we call long-term circular migrants. These are people who've gone to the urban areas, but they have strong links with the rural areas. Over a period of time, they find a toehold in the urban areas. Now, what we find and what I find that in India, a large majority of the first generation rural urban migrants are basically have the character of long-term circular migrants. They retain a very strong link with their areas of native areas, the areas of origin. The third category of migrants are short-term circular migrants. These are people who go to destination areas, states, they work there for 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, 8 months, 9 months, sometimes 15 months, but for definite periods. And then they come back to their villages, their native places. They do not have a foothold in urban areas. So they circulate between rural and urban areas. Essentially, the migrants who I have described as long-term circular migrants and short-term circular migrants are the people who generally work in what we call precarious jobs. Jobs which do not have job security, which do not pay very well, which are informal jobs. And these are the categories of migrants who are really affected by this crisis. So when the crisis happened, lockdown happened, of course, it led to the loss of employment and earnings of a large majority of the working population. As far as labor migrants were concerned, many of them work with contractors in the construction sector, even in manufacturing and so on. And these contractors, as soon as lockdown happened, very often disappeared. And the migrant laborers were left with wage areas. Please note that 60 to 70% of short-term circular migrants stay in work sites. They stay in construction sites, they stay in workshops, they stay in mines and so on. And when lockdown happened, these sites became close to them. So they were literally on the road. Those who lived in rented accommodation could not pay the rent, and landlords started harassing them. Then there was a crisis of food. Many of the migrants live in very poor living conditions. I have seen places where workers shared a room, 30 workers to a room, 15 of them sleeping in the daytime shift and 15 of them sleeping during the nighttime shift. And when lockdown happened, it was intolerable for them to stay under lockdown conditions. And then there was the tremendous desire for them to reunite with their kin and family, because of course the pandemic would have affected any of them. Now, as the strange part of this is that when the lockdown happened, and I'm even referring to the affidavit which the government of India filed in the Supreme Court on the 29th of March, no reliable data of these migrants were available. And this is a genuine problem. Scholars like me have made assessments, they have made estimates, but reliable data on circular migrants is not available. The census is the most authentic source of migration data, but it only provides data on long-term permanent migrants and also semi-permanent migrants, but you cannot separate the two. The NSS provides sample estimates of migration. It also provided in the last instance an estimate of short-term circular migration, but it is a gross underestimate. I have actually estimated that there are about 6 crore short duration circular migrants. And that also that there are about 3 crore short duration migrants and about 2 crore long duration circular migrants who are interstate. So the interstate migrants are about 5 crores. And if you add their family members, then you are talking about 10 to 12 crore migrants, 5 crores migrant workers and 10 to 12 crore migrants along with migrant families who were affected by the pandemic, those who are in precarious jobs. I think the question arises, why do people out-migrate? Why do states? Because this is endemic. One of the reasons is that out-migrating states have had low growth. the quality of employment in these states has been low compared to other states. The agriculture, the quality of livelihoods in agriculture has been deteriorating, and the gap between what agriculture can offer and what non-agricultural employment can offer has been increasing over time. There is a lot of landlessness and near landlessness among the rural poor, particularly those who belong to the lower social strata. There has been a decline in a number of traditional industries, and this is very important for states like UP and Bihar. And when you look at the other states or other centers, there's a higher availability of employment and higher earnings in those growth centers which are there. And these are largely located in the western parts and the southern parts of India. And then when workers start migrating, they get locked into what we call labor circuits, which operate either through contractors or they operate through known people who are their relatives and so on and so forth. And once they are part and parcel of known labor circuits, the cost of migration to them comes down and they become habitual migrants. Now, as far as UP is concerned, UP has the largest number of out migrants of all the different types that I talked about earlier. Among interstate migrants, UP share is 22%, followed by Bihar. Among interstate out migrant workers who are long-term circular migrants, UP share is the largest, 32%, which is followed by Bihar with 19%. If you look at short duration circular migrants, Bihar leads the share with about 28% and UP follows with about 23%. So UP and Bihar together contribute to more than half the total interstate migrants of whatever variety that you talk about. Permanent migrants, long-term circular migrants, short-term circular migrants. And our share in interstate migration distinctly exceeds our share of populations. Now, I just to point out, this is if you look at which states send out migrants and which state actually receive migrants, you can say that UP's share in the migrants who go out is among the largest. Whereas it is states like, places like Delhi, Maharashtra, UP and Bihar predominate in sending out migrants, but it is states like Maharashtra, Delhi, Gujarat, Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh, etc., which are the in-migrating states. So the in-migrating states are all in the north, west, and south of the country. And if you, again, as I pointed out, among the long-term semi-permanent migrants, UP has the largest share, followed by Bihar, Rajasthan, West Bengal, Odisha, Kerala, etc. Then follow. And Bihar and UP lead as far as short-term circular migration is followed. There are other states, there are large states. Short-term circular migration is not only confined to poor states. You see Maharashtra, Andhra Pradesh, Gujarat, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, they also have a lot of short duration circular migration, but this is intrastate. These are large states with large intrastate inequalities. People travel from the poorer regions of these states to the more developed regions of these states for work. So both types of migration exist side by side. And clearly Bihar, UP, MP, West Bengal, Rajasthan, Chhattisgarh, these are these lead as far as interstate circular migration is concerned. So this is again giving you the same fact that when it comes to some states, interstate migration predominates. When it comes to other states, the blue bars, intrastate migration predominates. And this is an interesting pattern. If you look at UPs, if you look at our short-term circular migration and where do our workers go, nearly 40% of them are in construction, 30% of them are in manufacturing, and then there is a chunk of them, nearly 30% in trade, transport, and other services. UP's share in agricultural seasonal migration is much less than, for example, the share of Bihar or the share of Chhattisgarh. Now, if you take many of in the post-pandemic period, I'm not going into the kind of conditions under which the migrants have come back to their home states. I think a lot of us know about it and have seen it. But as you know, UP in the post-pandemic situation, post 1st of May, has taken a number of steps for the repatriation of these migrants. And as of May 29, end of last month, more than 1,500 Shramik trains had brought back migrants to India, so to UP. About 30 lakh migrants were officially brought back, out of which 24 lakh migrants were brought back by trains. The total number of migrants who have possibly come back to UP easily exceeds 1 crore. Because as I told you, not more than 20 to 25% of migrants have come back by trains and buses. So the UP government has also arranged for transportation and shelters from the state borders, food packets for those on the road. It has made an ex gratia payment of 1,000 rupees to the migrant and workers. And it has also made provisions of ration kits or ration cards for the returnee migrants, because they do not have, many of them did not have PDS cards and ration cards. And also the government has taken a number of steps for employability and employment, which I think most of you would be aware of. It has announced skill mapping, and skill mapping has taken place along with the registration of migrants who are coming in. It has promised social security and insurance. It has talked about employment in agricultural departments and dairy departments. And it has considered the scope of further employment in MSMEs. And in order to do that, it has entered what the Honorable Minister pointed out, MOUs with public and private partnership. And it has also announced the creation of a migrant commission. I'll come back to the details of these and the concrete nature of details that are needed for each of these. I think when you talk about migration, and these are the last 2 or 3 slides that I want to quickly go through with you, is that actually migration is an interstate phenomena. And when you have an interstate phenomena, then you need to have a national policy on migration. For many years, I have now been talking of a national policy on migration. I've been writing about it. And please remember also that interstate migration, interstate quarantine, as listed as item number 81 in the central schedule. It is a center's responsibility. So states can do their bit, but center also has to coordinate and have a policy. So in view of that fact, what should be the key elements of a national migration policy? And this is something which now emerges very clearly in the post-COVID, as we go through the huge reverse migration that we have seen. Number one, there has to be a policy of registration of all workers. Every worker should have a registration card based on self-declaration. That registration card should be the basis for providing social security to all the workers. Secondly, there is dire need, and this is when I was a member of the NCUS, we had mooted a proposal for universal social security. Time and again, we have realized that there is a dire need for a universal social security system which is portable across states. So when a laborer travels from one state to the other, he does not lose his or her entitlement. Thirdly, we have to take steps to reduce the enormous precarity of employment that 90% of our workers face. How can there be a situation that today there is a lockdown, tomorrow they lose their jobs, and not only lose their jobs, cannot even access wage areas? This situation cannot possibly affect the vast majority of our workers, and we have to bring about a change in this situation. We have to have more effective labor regulation. I know of cases in 20 to 30% cases, migrant workers are stuck with wage areas. There is no effective system to which they can appeal to get back their wages. And I'm not talking about the lockdown period. The Supreme Court heard a case on that. I'm talking about pre-lockdown wage areas. Our urban policies have to be made more inclusive for migrants. They should not be treated as nowhere citizens. The central government has announced a rental housing policy. We have to have a comprehensive policy by which migrants who live and work in cities can have safe housing, safe workplaces, which give them a healthy environment in which they can work. And finally, we have to shift the focus back on regionally balanced development. If you look at the record of the last 30 years, And the economic survey under the last chief economic advisor brought this out very sharply. Regional disparities have grown very, very sharply in the last 20 to 30 years after liberalization. The more regional disparities grow, the more the demographic structure pushes workers out. They will grow from the poorer parts of the country to the parts of the country which are developing, creating imbalances and putting a pressure. So we must have a policy for rural regeneration and regionally balanced development, a much more vigorous policy. At the state level, although states like UP and Bihar have made a number of announcements, what I as an economist would like to see are concrete measures being taken. It is not enough to make announcement, but there has to be a concrete follow-up in each case. And I will come through this. Odisha so far is the only source state which 2 days ago, as they say in English, put its money where its mouth is. It has now announced a rupees 20,000 crore package, which it talks about rural regeneration, agricultural regeneration, regeneration of MSMEs, and skill generation. You need to have a concrete program going forward for employment, not only of migrants, but remember, of course, even non-migrants are facing horrendous conditions. So what do we do? First of all, we must have a social security registration of all workers. This the states can initiate. They do not need to wait for the country. We have states like Rajasthan, which initiated a social security card for all workers some years ago. And I think states like UP and Bihar and Odisha need to follow state. Number two, please, states have to introduce portability of state and work for interstate, for all interstate policies. Remember, UP, our migrants go out, but we also import a lot of workers from other states. The poor migrant who died on his cycle taking his wife and child back to Chhattisgarh had come to UP for work. So we need to use portability, introduce portability, inter-district portability and interstate portability of all social protection programs. Third, the Manrega. I was shocked to see a program on NDTV day before yesterday where workers said that although migrant workers had gone back to Bihar, although they had completed quarantine, they were being denied work in Manrega. The central government has given an extra allocation of 40,000 crores under Manrega because migrant workers are returning to host states, and host states have still not been able to set up modalities by which these workers be given work under Manrega. This, I think, is a shame, and states need to look into this. There has to be a more comprehensive plan for rural regeneration. This is the opportunity. We must seize it. This may be turn this crisis into an opportunity. Have plans for rural and regional regeneration. Focus on Bundelkhand. Focus on Eastern UP. Focus on Central UP. Focus on sub-regions within each of these. Have plans. Put all the minds together. Those of you who are listening together. And what do we need in order to have a regional and social regeneration? Have a plan, an action plan for industrial regeneration. Don't leave it for PPPs. We have to vigorously, in cases like UP, we have to vigorously revive our industrial clusters. The strength of UP is in traditional industrial clusters. Those who are in Banaras know about handlooms, they know about wooden toys, they know about, so the UP is peppered with large industrial clusters which need to go back, which need to be inserted in global value chains, which need to generate value addition. These are the people who have gone to Bhiwandi. These are the people who have gone to Surat. We need to bring them back. They have the skills and they need to work in the clusters in UP. Finally, we have to ramp up financial and institutional support to migrant returnees. A lot of migrant returnees already have skills. They have skills. They have entrepreneurship. And what needs to be done is to utilize their skill and entrepreneurship to help them set up enterprises, either individually or in groups and partnership. I think what we need to do in the source states like UP and Bihar, have a vigorous program by which we turn this crisis into an opportunity, close the gap between these states and the rest of the country, and create valuable employment opportunities for migrants and non-migrants. So I'll stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. Sir has presented a very elaborative and informative talk on the issues of migrant laborers. He has rightly pointed out that every worker should have a registration card, which would provide social security to every worker. Thank you so much, sir, for your enlightening lecture.